We're going to talk about reputation and making it useful and portable. And then we're going to talk about some SDKs that might be useful or interesting for some of your hacky hacks. I am David Phillips. This is me on the Bird app, the Twitter. I put this picture in there so that you know I'm cool. So you respect me. Yeah, that's me. Yes. Yes, I'm a California native, born and bred. Now reside San Diego. Now I reside in New York, and now I'm here to chat with all the Parisian wonderful hackers and people from around the world. But we're just gonna jump into it. So, quick context, show of hands: who has heard of DIDs or who has built something with them? Yes, exactly 1/3. Oh, exactly half. Welcome. So we're just going to do a quick overview, contextualize, like, what is identity? How do we see this in the world? And then how does this evolve into, this digital analog hybrid crazy future that we have going on? Traditionally, we use credentials to get access to things. The passports, right? We all had one to come to the country. In the US, they're really militant about making sure you have an ID card to get into a bar. Even if you look 50, they won't serve you a drink. But these credentials generally come from black boxes. They're institutions that we don't really have control over, insight into, or a deep understanding of how they work or why they work how they do. But they allow us to do lots of nice things, these credentials, these identities that we carry around, or proof of identities that we carry around in our pockets. We can ride airplanes. We can get mortgages. So right now there's this like massive trend, and it's ongoing and it's not slowing down. So just a couple of data points for you. 8% more time year over year has been spent online every year for the last 15 years. So we're starting to run into this thing of we have these really nice versions of physical ID cards that we've got in analog identities, but that all starts to break down when we look into the digital world. How does identity, how is it useful? Right? How do we take ourself with us to different parts of the internet? Because if more of our lives are happening online, well, wouldn't I like to have some credibility when I show up to a different ecosystem? So that brings us to the next point of okay, we all have wallets. Is a wallet an identity? I would argue no. Some people would argue yes. But I think good identity ultimately is sovereign, secure, and portable. And that's the litmus test that it needs to be able to pass. And so our wallets are great because they're secure and they're sovereign, but they're not, a wallet address isn't necessarily useful beyond the bounds of a specific blockchain ecosystem. So we can build all sorts of wonderful history in Ethereum, but it breaks down when we, go over to Twitter or some e-commerce platform or anywhere else that we do things that are important on the internet. Racing along here. But what we are going to look at today is, what is an identity graph? How can they be constructed? And how can they become super, super powerful tools, not only as a vehicle of individual sovereignty, but in terms of what you can reliably gain access to or how you can represent yourself online. So what is a DID? What is a DID? So a DID is a key pair. Oh, yes. A DID is a key pair. So you have a public key and a private key. The way NextID works is it's the same. You can basically have the same keys they're using on Ethereum. And it is a key pair that is used to sign and certify control of an identifier or an entity on the internet. So as you see in this little visual, you have like an avatar or an ID. That is a key pair. That is a DID. And you're signing a message to say, I own or I control this Ethereum address. I own or I control this lens profile, this ENS, or a Reddit account or a GitHub account. And so what we're doing is we're taking these disparate identifiers, these different pieces of ourselves, and we're creating a single graph that is a more holistic representation of our self. And we'll get into why this matters and why this can be cool. in a little bit. But I'm just going to pause there and take any questions that have come up from anyone, because small group, I can.
Create base now.
So the cool thing about DIDs is you don't actually need a specific ecosystem or a blockchain, because a cryptographic signature is as a standalone unit, publicly verifiable. It's really easy for me to look at a signature and say, you've proved by signing this message, like when you sign into any dApp, you're proving that you control that address without basically giving them your private key for them to be able to execute transactions. And so we don't have, like in DID world, we don't have the need for distributed, like a single distributed ledger, because there is no double spend problem. There's no like, oh, this is a transaction that's being used to spend money. It's very much using like a base cryptography unit to say, I control a Twitter account, or I control this address. Was that a little helpful? Great question. Yes.
Who creates the DID?
So who creates the standard? Who creates a DID for a user? For a user. So because it's a key-based technology, it is by nature sovereign in that sense. And what I mean there is, you as the key holder, you can only create a DID. You can only modify this graph if you hold the private public key pair. Yes. No, this is great. I'm sure common questions.
How you ensure like who's the real person behind the DID?
Yeah. So when you sign into Adapt today, have you signed in with Ethereum? Yeah. There's not really a huge question of, does the person who signed this message to gain access to the system, did they control this address? So it's the exact same mechanic in the system as that system.
I know that, but I'm just wondering, have you been thinking and trying to solve exactly that? So because it's whatever conventions and public private key.
Yeah. So are you talking about that from like an attribution and KYC standpoint? Yeah, so we're a bit agnostic to that part of the world. There's a lot of people thinking about that problem, doing really great work on it, and we support all of those use cases. Where we, like, there are people that want to build really rigid KYC systems. There are people that want to build like fully anonymous DID graphs, and we try to treat them both the same, to power them both. Yeah, of course. There's one more question. Okay, cool. I'll keep moving. Yeah, DIDs are basically a self-issued key pair, and they're used to certify ownership and control. So you're taking an avatar, or like, linking a bonding entity. You're saying, I own this other thing. Pretty simple. Just a connecting fiber like in a spider web. Yeah. So for today, we think about it as like, this is doxing technology, or this is a violation of privacy, because there's a lot of different strong ideas in our field. We like to think of this, or conceptualize the data and identity. There's above the water iceberg, and there's below the water iceberg. Below the water requires some sort of selective disclosure. But all of us probably have some sort of public online presence. Excuse me. Thank you. So we focus entirely on, like, what do you want to present to the world about yourself, that you similar to, like, you participate on Twitter, so you're generating a public data footprint. So now we get into a little bit of like how that gets built and how that gets generated. There are 3 key pieces to NextID that we're going to talk about and how to use them. So there's proof service. This is the create and store the DIDs. There's relation service, which is querying them. So if there's anyone that's ever created a DID for anything, we've ingested almost all of them. And so it's a simple API backed up on Arweave, so it's publicly available. But you can, relation service is a way to query them. You get the data. So you create the data, you read the data, two different services. And then the third thing we're going to talk about is a nice new way that we package those things together for universal profile experience. So we're going to talk a little bit about what a universal profile experience is in a minute. But that's the part that we are most excited about and that we really hope that you have a look at as well, because we would love your feedback because we just released it this week. It is not in the App Store, but there are docs available for it. Yeah, super good question. So we talked a little about what the identity graph is, revisit how it can look. This is an actual example from our system. So this is my co-founder, Yeezy. We have here the Ethereum address, and then that was linked to a Twitter, which was linked to a Keybase thing. And now we actually all the way over to GitHub, lens profile, and then our next ID binder. So what we think is really, really cool and exciting here is if you have any node in this graph, you, when querying our system, can return and resolve to any point of it. So what that means is if you're building a wallet, for example, and you're like, it would be really nice if I could, have a secure way of sending someone money using their Twitter handle. If someone's interacted at any point with the DID system and bonded their Twitter, which is the most common activity, now it becomes trivial because I type in, Twitter, David's Twitter, or @David, and then I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, I'm certain that the owner of that Twitter is the owner of that address, so I can send money on basically anything. So we're going to just jump into the Universal Profile SDK here. Pretty simple. There's basically 4 different endpoints. And I'm happy to get into details or, just talk directly to you after, but the docs are all there. This is at api.web3.bio. So please check that out and let us know if it sucks. We want to hear about it. It doesn't. And then I'm going to jump over to proof service in just a second. But I'm going to live demo. Why not? Where is it? And cool. Wi-Fi don't fail me now. Bear with me 1 second. So what you're able to do with it always breaks when you demo it, huh? Yeah. So this is a universal profile view. And this is what you're actually able to get with the API is all of this stuff that our friend Yeezy has done is available in this display. And you're actually able to plug this into your apps so that when someone signs in with an address, you hit our API and say, does this person have an ID graph? And then it returns the DID graph. And so you're able to create a super rich display of user information without forcing them to manually port that over once again like they have 100 times before. So we have hundreds of thousands of current users that have DIDs, and then there's a module where you can actually prompt them to create one for the first time as well. Any thoughts or any questions there? Yeah.
So you said that DIDs were independent.
They can be, yes. Yeah. So we use all the same cryptographic processes that Ethereum uses because those are best in practice. But these actually live on Arweave. So they're totally a decentralized database that everything gets pushed to. And then we keep a copy of those in AWS and have a really high performance API to make it so you can actually do things with them super easily.
With transactions that are done out there and question with.
So we don't try to dox or aggregate any data that a person doesn't want aggregated about themselves. And so a really important thing is like a DID is not a transaction between two addresses. It's a signature certifying that the same party controls two different identifiers or two different entities. Yeah. So our APIs are really high performance. They handle about 50 million calls a week right now. So we do actually have some users, and we look forward to welcoming you into that family as well. So on the proof service side, it gets a little bit more technical. I'm going to try to say higher level, and now we're getting a bit more into the weeds towards the end. But the way, for example, that you can actually create a DID that binds an address to a Twitter is with something called a proof post. So we have our avatar or our what we call, just think of those as keys, your DID keys. You're posting a special string on Twitter that our system ingests. Is the verified, basically, you have to post a special string that the system generates for you to say, yes, this is the cryptographic signature that says I own this Twitter account. So it's like you tell us, you're telling our backend, I own David PCO. That's my Twitter handle. Yes. And then you have to post a special sequence of characters like 0x1234 on your Twitter account to then complete the generation of that proof that you own that entity. And then the DID gets issued in the system, or DID gets issued by self through the system. So a little bit maybe unfamiliar, but I promise you when you look at it, it's a 3-step system and is pretty easy to build on. So if you're interested, this is kind of our full stack and structure detailing where stuff lives, how the model and data storage works. Love to talk to you more about this, but I don't think it's too important to go into right now. And that's where we're going to wrap it up. So thank you guys for coming. If you have any questions, I have 5 more minutes to monopolize the space. And you have been wonderful. Yes.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, man. So the integration to these other kind of Web2 properties, is it done via OAuth, or maybe I missed that? So
the answer is yes, and so we like to bypass OAuth whenever possible to reduce and eliminate platform risk. And so we do that with that proof post mechanic that I showed a second ago, because like for example, a post-based social media won't turn off. Like they're not going to eliminate everyone's abilities to post, but they do turn off APIs.
Right. So you just essentially do it out of band.
Yeah. We don't count on their consent to be able to certify that ownership or their collaboration, though we do have it in some cases. Any other questions? Yes.
Hey, so the title of your talk is about tech reputation anywhere.
Yes.
Do you have some research on having some reputation score or this kind of process? Yeah, just to assess reputation or provide any signals or insights regarding that.
Yeah, so reputation there's a lot of different approaches for it. And I think the easiest one to talk about is Gitcoin Passport, where like the more things that you have linked together, the higher degree of the higher score you have of being a person. What we view as reputation might be a little bit different than we have historically or traditionally. And what I mean there is we treat humans and machines the same. We don't really care that much if a machine is participating in a certain ecosystem, because machines can provide value. And so I'm not sure I'm really directly answering your question, But what's important here is that you have a persistent footprint that can travel with you beyond a single chain or beyond a single platform. So what we want to enable, the same way that DeFi allows for monetary and transactional portability across dApps, what we want is to create a world where wherever you go online, you've brought the parts of you that matter along with you.
Okay. And
Yeah.
the DID is a glue that
DID is exactly the glue.
Yeah.
It's the webs of the spider web.
Yeah, and after you can build on top of all that any kind of algorithm that will score the reputation. I guess you are doing this, but
Exactly.
you're providing the glue that's enable to link you on-chain, off-chain, social network, and so on data.
Yeah. And there's other standards called verifiable credentials that are getting great adoption, where you actually can package up a government issued ID without disclosing what that ID is, and say there is a government issued credential associated with this address without showing your name or height or address or anything like that. So this is the glue layer, and then the other pieces, they get built and put in on top of that. So if you did want to have a proof of personhood on top of a DID system, there's a lot of cool things people are doing there. Yeah. Thanks, everybody.